producing gasoline in the country. And the intent was in that destruction to generate a regime change to one that's going to be more friendly to the United States. I'd like you to comment on that as a foreign policy, whether you would support that kind of foreign policy, would you oppose it, and explain to us why.
Well, when we talk about national defense, I always reference it by telling you that there are things we don't know. And I always even say that about the presidents. There are things that presidents and key leaders in the Congress know that you and I don't. And so, if we knew, we maybe have a different opinion. And so that's always important to recognize. I do think this. I think that the world is a safer place when America has the strongest military on the planet. And the reason why I believe that is because America is pretty much the only powerful military in human history that has not used its power to conquer land and grow its territory. I mean, let's be fair, perhaps during the era of manifest destiny, but certainly not in the modern era. Certainly not in the last 100 years. America doesn't invade Iraq because it wants to turn Iraq into a colony. America doesn't go into Afghanistan because it wants to make Afghanistan a colony. America, by and large, sends its young men and women off to die on foreign battlefields, almost always for other people's freedom and for freedom around the world. So if we... Having a military capable of carrying out covert operations is important because it may be necessary in an instance like that. Now, I don't know the feasibility of it. I'm not a military commander. I don't have all the intelligence behind what that would mean. I don't have the intelligence on what that would mean in Iran. I mean, would it undermine the regime or would it strengthen it? I don't know the answers to all of that. I can just tell you that America has to have options like that available. Because at the end of the day, our national security is paramount. It's the only excuse we have for deficit spending is if you're doing it for national security. There is no other good excuse except for deficit spending than national security. And I'm not advocating that tonight. I am telling you that's how important national security is. And whatever's in the best interest of the United States and its national security is what I am in favor of. And if that means a covert operation like that, we'd have to be supportive of it. But since it's covert, we probably shouldn't talk about it anymore. So.
Hello, Mr. Rubio.
Hi.
I'm Jenna Moore, and I'm also a campaign member. And I was wondering, if you're elected, what tests will you use to determine if legislation is constitutional or unconstitutional? Or is interpreting the Constitution exclusively the domain of the Supreme Court?
Well, it's ultimately the domain of the Supreme Court, but it's not only the domain of the Supreme Court. I think that legislators have an obligation, not to vote or pass or promote legislation they believe expands the scope of government. The Constitution is pretty simple. The Constitution is a document of limitation. It was based on the notion, the French and the Americans kind of started out in the same place. They both wanted freedom. They wanted to get rid of monarchies. They wanted to create republics. The French, however, said, our republic will be based on the notion that we're just going to put better people in charge and we'll get better government. The American Revolution was based on the notion that all people are pretty much flawed. We can't trust any people. And so let's just we'll have to have people in government because you have to have government run by people, but we'll put all kinds of limitations around it. Therefore, our Constitution, particularly our federal Constitution, is a document of limitation. It limits the scope of the federal government, what it should be doing and not be doing. One of its most powerful limits, for example, is the 10th Amendment, which basically says the federal government, any power that it doesn't explicitly have belong to the states. There are other limitations, like the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. The whole Constitution is a limit on government. And so I think every piece of legislation should be examined from the point of view of, is this the proper role of the federal government? Or are we just trying to address a problem in society and injecting the federal government in it? And I think that really is what both parties have been guilty of doing over the last 25 or 30 years especially, is basically finding a federal-sponsored solution to every issue in America. Every issue in America, from the social issues we talked about to, pythons invading the swamps of Florida. I mean, every issue we face has a federal solution to it. And I think that goes outside the role of the Constitution. And maybe it's not per se unconstitutional, but it certainly offends the purpose of the Constitution. We were never intended to have a central government. We were never intended to have a national government. Never. There was never this notion. We wanted strong, vibrant, powerful states that respected the individuality and creativity of the individual states. We understood, the framers did anyway, that competition among the states for jobs, for people, for business, that created public policy innovation. But the more powerful the federal government becomes, the harder it is to have strong states. And so I think we need to return to that. And that would be an important test for me in any legislation.
Thank you for taking the question, Mr. Rubio. I'm sure like the conservatives in this room, like I am, I'm disgusted at the lengths that the federal government is going to take care of health care. But we do need to recognize that it's at a crisis level right now. And unfortunately, the paradigm is to solve the crisis using government. I was wondering if you had any specific policy proposals that are based on free market or limited government that could improve access to health care, or if that's not the case, what your policies?
Well, first, it's important to describe, when we say healthcare has a crisis, it's important to accurately understand what the problem is. Crisis is an overused word, but I don't want to, if you don't have health insurance coverage, it's a crisis. I understand that. The vast majority of Americans are happy with the health insurance that they have. So about 48 million people in America, I don't say Americans because a significant portion of those 48 million are here illegally, but a significant portion of Americans have no health insurance coverage. 20, 30 million, 35 million, whatever that number may be, have no health insurance coverage. For them, it is a crisis. There are two problems in American healthcare that are the problems. The first is the cost of healthcare, and its utilization is not always its highest and best use. And that has to be addressed. Costs have to be addressed, and utilization has to be addressed, multiplicity of the same tests, whether the best practices are being applied. I think that can be addressed with very minimal government involvement. Just creating a platform for electronic medical records and the ability to share best practices across the billing spectrum, those things can help and go a long way towards the cost aspect of it. The second aspect of it, and the one you hear a lot of talk about, is how to provide health care coverage for 32 million Americans who don't have access to health insurance. The solution the administration is saying is, what we want to do is we want to create a government-run healthcare plan that is available to everybody. Everybody can buy into it if you want. And it sounds good on paper at the beginning. Here's the problem. Number one is it would cost a tremendous amount of money to do that. Number two is that it would eat up the entire marketplace within a short period of time. Government is not a fair competitor. Every time government has entered any private venture, on any scale, anytime government has ever entered any enterprise, it has taken over that industry within a short period of time. And there's no belief that it will be any different than healthcare here in America. Why is that a concern? Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Why is that a concern? Well, it's a concern for the following reason. If it doesn't do anything to contain costs, and you force everybody into this government-run healthcare program, which, by the way, and one of the reasons they're talking about constraining costs is to push down reimbursement rates in Medicare at a time when more and more baby boomers are retiring, where you have more people and less money. The only way that you can offer care for less money to more people is by rationing the care. In fact, as part of the stimulus plan, there's studies put in place to begin to do what they do throughout the world, and that is they do a cost-benefit analysis of a treatment versus how long you're going to live. Now, real-world experience. My dad had a small lung cancer nodule, small to me, large to him, in January, removed. My dad is 82 years old. I have a feeling that under their model, 82-year-olds don't get that surgery. And I don't think Americans are willing to accept that rationing of health care. And so here's the solution. I think the solution is basically to have a vibrant private market where individuals can buy health coverage independent of their employment status. As a former legislator, 6 years and over in the legislature, you get vested. That allows you to buy into the state plan for the rest of your life. When you're a legislator, you get it really cheap. When you retire, you still get it, but you got to pay for it. It's about $900 a month for family coverage. You may think that's a lot of money, but let me tell you something. At least I have something that I can buy into, because I'm self-employed. I never could have been self-employed had I not had the access to that health care plan. Most Americans don't have that. You lose your job, you lose your insurance. That means people can't be entrepreneurial. That means people are afraid to shift jobs. That means if you're unemployed, you're uninsured. And that means if you decide one day that your boss doesn't do a good job, so you're going to open up a business to put him out of business because you can do it better, you can't do it because you'll lose your benefits. And how do you do that? You create a vibrant private market where individuals can buy plans tailored to their needs. If you're a healthy, single, 25-year-old male, what you probably need is a primary care and catastrophic plan that has very low premiums and very high copays. Why? Because you're probably never going to the doctor. But if you do, you're probably really sick. That's the plan you need. On the other hand, if you're a 38-year-old father of 4, you probably need to pay a little higher premium per month because your kids are always going to the doctor, even if you are not. That kind of individuality is not available in the American health insurance system, and we've got to